Andrew Campbell had spent the better part of 2 decades building his reputation at Northridge Dynamics in Chicago. At 52 years old, he was one of the company's senior engineers, respected not just for his technical expertise, but for his methodical approach to risk management and long-term system stability. In an industry often obsessed with rapid delivery and flashy innovation, Andrew had been a quiet anchor, ensuring that the company's network solutions for industrial clients remained solid, scalable, and reliable. His office was filled with sketches, system diagrams, and old project binders, a testament to years of consistent, meticulous work. That winter had been unusually harsh, the winds cutting across the lake and turning the streets into icy corridors. On one of those gray, brittle mornings, Andrew received an unexpected calendar invite for a meeting on the top floor. The tone was oddly formal. He put on his jacket, took his notebook out of habit, and headed to the conference room, feeling a low hum of unease growing inside him. The meeting was brief, sterile, almost clinical. Two executives he barely knew sat at the far end of the long table. Without much ceremony, they informed him that his position was being eliminated due to a company-wide restructuring. There were no discussions about his years of service, no mention of his achievements. A prepared folder was slid across the table containing severance details and non-disclosure agreements. It was clear the decision had been made long before he entered the room. In reality, Northridge Dynamics was preparing itself for acquisition, and the new investment group pushing for the sale believed that shedding older, higher-paid employees would make the company more attractive on paper. Efficiency metrics were being rewritten to favor short-term profits over engineering excellence. Andrew, along with several others who had built the company's backbone, had become an inconvenient liability. He returned to his office, packed his personal items into a single cardboard box, and left the building without ceremony. As he made his way through the lobby, former colleagues avoided eye contact, retreating into their offices or pretending to be absorbed in their screens. There were no goodbyes, no reassurances, only the heavy silence of a company moving on without him. Out in the parking lot, the cold bit sharply into his hands as he placed the box in the back seat of his car. He sat behind the wheel for a moment, staring ahead without seeing anything. Projects he had spent 3 years developing were now abandoned, left half-finished. His team had been dissolved overnight, scattered without warning. Northridge, the company he had once felt a deep loyalty to, had discarded him like an outdated piece of equipment. The weight of it all settled in his chest as he pulled out of the lot for the last time. The first months after Andrew's departure from Northridge Dynamics were some of the most difficult he had ever faced. For the first time in years, his days were no longer structured by project deadlines, engineering reviews, and strategic meetings. Instead, they were filled with endless job searches, resume revisions, and silent hours staring at rejection emails. Despite a resume rich with achievements and leadership roles, Andrew found that his age had become an unspoken barrier. Recruiters praised his experience politely, but subtly steered their searches toward younger candidates described as adaptable and energized for fast-paced environments. He adjusted his expectations, widening the range of positions he applied for, tailoring cover letters to emphasize flexibility and contemporary skills. Still, the process was exhausting and often humiliating. Interviews that once would have been straightforward technical discussions became grueling assessments, subtly probing whether he could fit into a culture increasingly dominated by recent graduates and rapid turnover. The cold Chicago winter turned into a sluggish spring as Andrew kept applying, networking, and pushing through the growing doubts gnawing at the edges of his mind. One afternoon, while scanning listings he had nearly memorized, a posting caught his eye. It was a small company based in Austin, Texas, Riverfront Systems. They were focused on building custom network solutions for large-scale agricultural operations, a niche that was beginning to see rapid technological investment. Unlike the larger corporations, Riverfront emphasized the need for robust, scalable architecture over flash and speed. They were looking for someone who could build a system from the ground up, who understood stability better than anyone else. Andrew crafted his application carefully, focusing on his strengths in long-term planning and risk mitigation. To his surprise, the response was almost immediate. The leadership at Riverfront, A group of seasoned professionals who had broken away from larger firms, valued depth and real-world experience over buzzwords. After a few practical interviews and a thorough review of his past projects, they extended him an offer. Relocating to Austin was not an easy decision. Chicago had been his home for over 30 years, the city where he had built his career, friendships, and routines. But something inside him knew he needed more than just another job. He needed a clean break, a place where the weight of the past would not press down on him every time he walked into an office building. Austin greeted him with mild, warm air and sprawling landscapes dotted with technology hubs and farmlands. Riverfront's office was modest but buzzing with quiet energy. Unlike the corporate towers he had grown used to, this space felt personal, purposeful. The team was small, their ambitions clear but grounded in realism. They wanted to grow, but they wanted to do it right. From his first week, Andrew was entrusted with designing the foundational architecture for Riverfront's new line of products. There were no endless committees or tangled management layers to navigate. His expertise was not just welcomed, it was relied upon. For the first time in years, he found himself waking up with a sense of anticipation rather than dread. Starting from scratch was not easy. He faced unfamiliar problems, tight resource constraints, and the relentless pressure of building something that needed to last. But it was his kind of challenge, the kind that demanded careful thought, meticulous design, and a steady hand. In the quiet hours of early mornings and late evenings, as he mapped out systems and reviewed code frameworks, Andrew felt a renewed sense of purpose taking root. He was not just patching up legacy systems anymore. He was creating something new, something that bore his mark from the ground up. After months of doubt and displacement, he was once again exactly where he needed to be. While Andrew was quietly rebuilding his career in Austin, Northridge Dynamics entered a rapid and visible decline. After the so-called restructuring, which had pushed out many of its most experienced engineers, the company's internal structure became hollow. Leadership, now composed largely of financial managers and short-term strategists, prioritized immediate profitability over sustainable growth. Projects were stripped down to the bare minimum. Testing phases were shortened or skipped entirely. Training programs, once a cornerstone of the company's reputation for quality, were deemed non-essential and quietly dismantled. At first, the signs of trouble were subtle. A few delayed software patches, a handful of minor client complaints. But as months passed, the cumulative effects of these decisions began to surface. Northridge had built its reputation on reliable, highly tailored network solutions for some of the largest oil, gas, and industrial clients across the Midwest. These customers depended on flawless system performance, especially in high-risk operational environments. Small errors could escalate into massive financial and safety liabilities. When the first major system failures occurred, Northridge's weakened technical teams struggled to respond. Temporary fixes were issued hastily, but they only masked deeper flaws. Word spread through the tightly connected industry networks. Critical partners and long-term clients began voicing their dissatisfaction more publicly. Missed deadlines, unexplained outages, and erratic system behavior undermined years of carefully cultivated trust. The blow that Northridge could not absorb came from Whitestone Grains, one of the largest agricultural conglomerates in the region. After a series of system malfunctions during a critical harvest season, Whitestone terminated its multi-year contract with Northridge. The loss of this partnership instantly erased nearly 40% of the company's revenue. It also triggered a domino effect, with other clients reviewing or canceling their contracts, unwilling to risk similar disruptions. The market's reaction was swift and brutal. Northridge's stock value, already fragile, plummeted within weeks. Internal morale collapsed alongside it. Employees who had remained after the restructuring now rushed to find exits before the inevitable mass layoffs began. Talent drained away in every department, further crippling the company's ability to stabilize itself. Faced with mounting losses and dwindling cash reserves, the board of directors moved into crisis mode. They hired external consultants to explore strategic options, but the choices were grim. Bankruptcy loomed as a real possibility. In a last-ditch effort to salvage any remaining value, the investors began quietly shopping Northridge around to potential buyers, hoping that someone might acquire the company for its remaining contracts and physical assets. Behind closed doors, former executives who had once championed quality and foresight watched the company's downfall unfold with a grim sense of inevitability. Northridge had not simply been mismanaged. It had been hollowed out from within, its foundation of expertise and professionalism discarded for the illusion of quick profits. What had taken decades to build unraveled in less than a year. Meanwhile, outside the crumbling walls of the company he once helped shape, Andrew remained unaware of the full extent of the collapse. He had no need to look back. His focus was on building something new, something that would not repeat the mistakes that had brought Northridge to ruin. At the time when Northridge was crumbling under the weight of its mismanagement, Riverfront Systems was quietly making waves in the agricultural sector. With Andrew Campbell now fully integrated into the startup's team, the company was preparing to launch a new project that would reshape the landscape of network solutions for agri-industrial complexes. The project was bold in its design, blending cutting-edge technology with sustainable practices that could significantly improve efficiency and reduce operational risks for large agricultural operations. Andrew's experience, honed over decades of designing complex systems, played a critical role in shaping the project. His meticulous attention to detail, combined with his deep understanding of industrial networks, allowed Riverfront's engineers to craft a product that was not only innovative, but also robust enough to withstand the harsh realities of agricultural environments. The system they were developing offered greater scalability, enhanced data analytics, and improved fault tolerance, features that would be invaluable to large-scale farming operations looking to modernize their infrastructure. As the project neared completion, word of Riverfront's work began to spread through the industry. Whitestone Grains, the same agribusiness giant that had severed ties with Northridge just months earlier, took notice. Desperate to find a new reliable partner, they initiated a series of meetings with Riverfront. Initially, Whitestone had been hesitant, still haunted by the memory of Northridge's failures. But as Riverfront's proposal took shape, their doubts began to fade. The technology they were offering was not only sound, it was forward-thinking. The potential for streamlining operations and mitigating risks was exactly what Whitestone had been seeking. After several months of negotiations, a multi-million-dollar contract was signed. Riverfront had secured its largest deal to date, and in doing so had vaulted itself into the big leagues. The company, once a small startup with limited resources, was now on the map as a serious player in the agritech sector. For Andrew, this was the culmination of his hard work and vision. It was validation not only of his expertise, but also of the principles he had fought for throughout his career: quality, sustainability, and long-term impact over quick profits and shortcuts. However, Andrew's mind didn't rest on the present victory. As he looked at the contract with Whitestone and the future opportunities it represented, he saw a chance to secure more. Northridge, despite its recent fall from grace, still had valuable assets: equipment, patents, and proprietary technology that, in the right hands, could still be of great value. He knew that Riverfront, with its newfound stability and expertise, could make good use of these resources. While the company was still rebuilding, Andrew believed that acquiring Northridge's remaining intellectual property could accelerate their growth even further. He quietly approached Riverfront's leadership with the idea of purchasing the remaining assets of Northridge. The move would allow them to incorporate valuable patents and technologies into their own offerings, strengthening their position in the market. While the idea was met with some hesitation, the thought of acquiring established technologies for a fraction of their original cost was too appealing to pass up. Negotiations were set in motion. As Riverfront moved forward with its own ambitions, Andrew felt a quiet sense of vindication. He had not only found a way to resurrect his career, but had also discovered a path to transform the very industry that had once rejected him. The collapse of Northridge had led to his departure, but it had also paved the way for a new beginning. In this moment, Andrew realized that sometimes failure was not the end, but simply the start of a new journey, one that would require patience, vision, and the courage to seize the opportunities hidden within the ruins. The negotiations for the acquisition of Northridge's remaining assets moved swiftly. The company, weakened by its internal collapse and the loss of its key personnel, was eager to rid itself of its remaining technological stock and intellectual property. Riverfront, armed with its newfound success and capital from the Whitestone Grains contract, acquired the assets at a fraction of their original value. It was a rare opportunity for a small company to step into the legacy of an industry giant. For Andrew, the deal felt like a return to a world he had once dominated, but this time under entirely different circumstances. He had never anticipated such a turn of events. The emotions he expected to feel, triumph, revenge, or bitterness, were nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a sense of quiet resolution, even satisfaction. The Northridge building, which had once felt like a fortress of success, now looked like a hollow shell of its former self. The once pristine halls were dim and unkempt. The managers who had once walked with the air of corporate royalty now trudged out of their offices, their faces blank with resignation. There was no joy in watching them leave, only a calm sense of closure. Andrew had watched the decline of Northridge from the outside, and now walking through the same hallways that once echoed with the noise of innovation, he could see how deeply the rot had set in. He passed the offices of former colleagues, some of whom had remained loyal to the company even as it veered into poor decisions. He felt no vindication in their downfall. Instead, he felt a steady determination to do things right this time. The mistakes of the past would not be repeated. There would be no rush for quick profits at the cost of quality. The mistakes that had led to Northridge's demise had not been about bad technology, but bad leadership, and Andrew was now in a position to change that. He walked into the conference room where the final documents were signed. The place still had the same cold, imposing atmosphere, but now it was his team that was in charge of making decisions that would guide the next chapter of the company. It was a surreal feeling. The room where so many strategic decisions had been made, which had once seemed so out of reach, was now his domain. As the legal formalities of the acquisition were completed, Andrew stepped away from the high-stakes world of corporate battles. Instead, he focused on the task at hand, integrating Northridge's valuable assets into Riverfront's existing work. The patents, technologies, and frameworks that had once been considered too advanced for the industry were now in the hands of a team that knew how to leverage them properly. Andrew's vision was clear. Riverfront would grow, but it would grow on its own terms. The old practices that had led to failure would not be carried forward. He was determined to ensure that the engineers, the true lifeblood of any company, were given the resources and respect they deserved. Under Northridge, too many had been treated like cogs in a machine, their potential stifled by a focus on short-term profits. Andrew knew that in order to build a sustainable future, Riverfront would need to create an environment that encouraged creativity and long-term thinking. The engineers would be at the center of that vision. With the acquisition complete, Andrew returned to Riverfront with a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but he knew that this time, things would be different. The lessons of the past had shaped his approach, and with the new technologies and systems now at his disposal, he felt confident that Riverfront would not only survive, but thrive. The return to Northridge and the successful integration of its assets had marked a significant turning point in Andrew's career. But it was only the beginning of what promised to be an exciting new phase of growth, one built on integrity, innovation, and respect for the work that engineers put into their craft. 2 years had passed since the acquisition of Northridge, and Riverfront Systems had transformed into an industry leader. What was once a small startup had now tripled in size, cementing its reputation in the agro-industrial sector and venturing into new fields. The path to success had not been easy, but the growth had been steady and grounded in a philosophy of meticulous design, respect for the craft, and integrity. Andrew had dedicated himself not only to developing new products and solutions, but also to nurturing the next generation of engineers. He believed that the true strength of a company lay in its people, and he had made it his mission to impart the lessons he had learned throughout his career. He taught not through grand speeches, but by example. His approach was simple: respect the work, respect the process, and always strive for excellence. Under his guidance, Riverfront's engineering team had grown, not just in numbers, but in expertise and dedication. The young engineers who joined the company quickly learned that quality mattered more than speed, and that true success came from delivering solutions that lasted. The environment at Riverfront was a far cry from the chaotic, profit-driven atmosphere that had led to the downfall of Northridge. There was no rush to cut corners or push products to market before they were ready. Instead, the company focused on creating sustainable solutions that met the real needs of its clients. This commitment to quality had paid off. Riverfront had secured several long-term contracts, including a multi-million-dollar deal with a global agribusiness that had been impressed with the company's ability to deliver innovative and reliable network infrastructure. Andrew found satisfaction in these successes, but what mattered most to him was the impact he had on the engineers around him. They had learned to approach each project with a sense of responsibility, not just to the company, but to the broader community that would benefit from their work. For Andrew, this was the true measure of success. He had seen too many talented engineers in the past whose potential had been stifled by short-term goals and a lack of vision. At Riverfront, that was no longer the case. Despite the company's rapid growth, Andrew remained grounded. He didn't allow himself to be swept away by the excitement of the moment or the pressures that came with success. Instead, he kept his focus on the long term. As Riverfront expanded its reach and explored new sectors, Andrew continued to emphasize the values that had helped the company succeed: integrity, patience, and respect for the work. He was determined that these values would never be compromised, no matter how big the company grew. Sometimes as he drove past the old Northridge building on the outskirts of Chicago, Andrew would pause for a moment, lost in thought. He would remember the days when everything seemed uncertain, when failure felt imminent, and when the future appeared bleak. But those moments of doubt were now distant memories. He understood that failure was not the end. It was simply a part of the process, a lesson learned along the way. In those moments of reflection, Andrew recognized that true strength lay in the ability to keep moving forward, to rebuild and start anew, no matter how daunting the task seemed. For Andrew, success was not measured by titles or financial gains, but by the lasting impact he had on the people around him and the work they produced. He had built a new foundation, one that was solid and sustainable, and that foundation would continue to support Riverfront's growth for years to come. As he looked out over the company he had helped create, Andrew knew that the values he had instilled in his team would continue to guide them, even in the face of challenges yet to come. The lessons of the past had shaped their future, and with that future, they would build something that would endure.